aside from us. So
welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is a treat to be back here today with Charles Eisenstein. Charles, how are you, brother?
Hey, I'm great. It's amazing that you do that, and you probably do that for every show, and you sound like totally authentically like overjoyed and excited.
Were you about to say I sound authentically you? You! Sorry. Yeah, it's I don't know where, like, the sound is just it's me now. I've merged with the sound. Guys, for those tuning into Charles for the first time, he's an American public speaker and author. Look, there is no way I can do this justice, but his work covers a wide range of topics: human history, human civilization, economics, spirituality, ecology. And some of the themes that we explore are anti-consumerism, interdependence. And today we're going to explore how myth and narrative influence our culture in the way of the conspiracy myth. I think, just as a key preface, Charles has written an essay called The Conspiracy Myth, and it's gorgeously well written. As Charles, I don't think he can help himself when he writes. It's just always going to be epic. But it's really thought-provoking, and I'm really excited to dive into this today. So, Charles, can you share with us, what is a conspiracy myth?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'll just give a little bit of background, actually, to the essay. It came because one of the things I said in the coronation was, wow, a lot of what's happening sure is juicy material for conspiracy theories. If there isn't a conspiracy going on, sometimes it sure looks like one. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people read that and thought, aha, he must be trying to smuggle in a conspiracy theory by providing all of this evidence that looks like a conspiracy theory.
Tuck it under the door.
Right. Exactly, yeah. And so pretty soon I was like reading critiques of the essay and discovering that I am in fact a right-wing conspiracy theorist. I'm like, gosh, I never knew that I was right-wing or a conspiracy theorist. It's amazing, like, how on the internet, like, people think they understand you. I got so much free of charge psychiatric diagnosis that I'm still working on.
Yeah.
And this is part of this is actually part of the phenomenon, which is the downgrading and dehumanizing of other people. And to put someone in an existing category that you have, a part of an existing preconceived world story. So if somebody says something that you disagree with, that must be because they fill in the blank. So anyway, I wrote this. I'm like, okay, am I a conspiracy theorist? What do I actually think about these? Because I think that a lot of the data points that the conspiracy theories draw from are totally valid. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there is such a thing as a conspiracy. I mean, some of them have been revealed. Watergate was a conspiracy. Enron was running a conspiracy. COINTELPRO, the FBI and the CIA actually were spying on and disrupting the civil rights movement and the environmental movement and Standing Rock and so forth. So it's not like it's a ridiculous fantasy to say they ever exist, but that doesn't mean that the overarching theory, which is what I was writing about, which is that the entire world, the workings of the world, all of its injustices and horrors are the product of a vast nefarious plot, a vast conspiracy that pulls all of the strings and controls all of the puppets. Like that theory of how the world works, that's what I'm referring to when I talk about a conspiracy myth. So I'm like, okay, why did I say conspiracy myth? If you just look at the title, you think, oh, he must be dismissing it as just a myth. But I think that anyone who ever says something is just a myth doesn't really understand what a myth is.
Yeah.
Myths, whether or not they are literally true, they carry truth. They're different from a fantasy or a delusion. But a myth is a vehicle for truth. So basically, I wrote about what is the truth that rides the vehicle of the conspiracy myth. That doesn't mean that it's literally true, and it doesn't mean that it isn't literally true. Like that's not even the right question, or that's not the question that I was exploring in the essay. So I drew out things such as like one of the truths is our, it gives voice to our intuition that there's a lot more to the world than what we've been told. That there's a larger reality that we're not fully aware of and that is hidden from us. Who is doing the hiding? Okay, the conspiracy theories say, okay, it's these guys. But there are other ways that things can be hidden from us. They can be hidden through ideological systems that are not the conscious creation of any one person, but that take hold in a society. They can be the product of or say another example, the idea that there's some invisible power pulling the strings of our world. And that power is so pervasive and so strong that even presidents and executives are under its dominion. Okay, what is that power? Like that, doesn't that ring true? Conspiracy theory says that that power is, the secret cabal of Illuminati or the reptilian aliens or something like that.
Yeah.
But you could also equally locate that power in something like capitalism or something like money. I mean, if there's one thing that pervades the whole world and pulls all the strings, sounds like money to me. Or it could be patriarchy or white supremacy or something like that. What I think it actually is the myth of separation, the myth of the separate self, and of human progress as being progress in our ability to control the world, to control the other, to dominate reality. That mythology that narrates what progress is, that's something that pulls the strings on a really deep level and can make us all into its puppets. And then just like the idea that there's more to reality than we know. That's true. What the reality is that we don't know. Oh, and another one, that there is some kind of intelligence in the events of the world. Some kind of orchestration going on.
Yeah.
Does that orchestration necessarily have to be some group of guys?
Who's the conductor? Yeah.
Right. Or could it be something like the emergent collective intelligence, like that Carl Jung was talking about? Just because a synchronicity happens doesn't mean that some dude arranged it. But haven't you ever had in your life these synchronicities? Like, oh my God, I can't believe I ran into that person at this moment, at this place. And like, the paranoid mind can go into like, is the CIA like monitoring me and setting this up?
Am I in the Truman Show? Yeah.
Right. Am I on the Truman Show?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Truman Show carries a powerful truth too. That's why it's such a compelling movie. So this is what I think is going on here. And what I'm saying could be, it applies whether or not some or all or none of these conspiracies are literally, factually, objectively true.
And in there, like one of the things that I found myself reflecting on as you were, one of the things, perhaps you said it or I was reflecting on it, was even the fact of like literal truth, like that's literally true, right? That statement is based on the myth of objective reality.
That's right. That's right. That's an expression of one of the foundational myths of our civilization, that there is something outside of ourselves that we can prove and gain certainty and control over through, I would call them rituals. Any mythology has rituals associated with it, and our rituals are called scientific experiments, where you perform this elaborate procedure and you divine certain information. It's like a divinatory practice. It provides a portal to the truth. And it depends on metaphysical assumptions, such as the repeatability of experiments, the isolability of variables, the independence of the observer, the assumption that the questions you ask do not change fundamentally the reality that you're questioning, things like that. Like, you can't prove these. These are metaphysical.
Yeah. As I'm hearing you, I'm like, some scientists, Charles, might be rubbed the wrong way to be called alchemists. But anyway.
Actually, though, I mean, I do often think of science as a religion, but it's only science's conception of religion that turns that into a disparaging term. But if you say, okay, what is the purpose of a religion? A religion is a vehicle for a sacred principle. And the sacred principle underneath science that it embodies and at its best that it expresses is the principle of humility. That's what science is. Fundamentally, like at its core essence, science is, I do not know, so I shall ask. I shall ask the world outside of myself. I shall let go of my preconceptions. I shall allow the data to change my mind. I will not be attached. That's the sacred essence of science. And that's a beautiful thing. And the priests that we call scientists, at their best, they dutifully enact this humility. And at their worst, and especially as it becomes institutionalized, which is what happens to all religions, I think, when they become institutionalized, they lose touch with their sacred essence. Then they serve the opposite. They become arrogant. And I think that a lot of the abuses of science today and the dysfunction of science really is an expression of arrogance. One aspect of it is the confirmation bias, the institutionalized confirmation bias and paradigm protection that happens through publication bias and funding bias, and the incursion of money into science. Certain sciences more than others, maybe not so much in mathematics, maybe a lot in pharmaceutical research. The more money there is, then usually the more resistant a scientific establishment is to heterodox, paradigms that challenge core assumptions. So anyway, I'm not sure how philosophical we want me to get here, but
as philosophical as you can get. Wait, we're just wisps on a cloud now. Okay, sorry, wait, bring it back. So we're talking about biases, and this kind of links into a question that I wanted to ask today was leading into the conspiracy. Why do we need in the zeitgeist a invisible power pulling these strings? Like, why is that in the story, in the narrative? Like, why is that part of the archetypal setup?
It's really hard for somebody who has grown up in a Western education and Western worldview to accept that intelligent, purposeful action can happen without a deliberate source of the purpose or the design. Like, to understand that order can emerge spontaneously out of chaos, that beauty, that intelligence can be a property of the universe, not imposed upon it by a god or a human or a conscious agent of some sort, but that the world itself is alive and the world itself is conscious. So that's part of it on a really deep level. And then, we come from an educational system that basically has told us we have all the answers. Here's how it works. Here are the four fundamental forces of nature. Here's, like, we know what's real and what isn't real. And then something happens in your life that violates what you were told is real. So the natural stepping stone is, well, everything they told us was a lie, and here's what's real. So to jump from one authority and one totalizing narrative to another one, from one theory of everything to another theory of everything. That's a stepping stone, but it's not the deepest initiation that we can go through. A deeper initiation actually has to go through a phase of I have no idea what's going on. A phase of bewilderment, so that we can open up. We can go to the appreciation of multiple paradoxical viewpoints, to hold paradox, and not as a permanent state, but the ability to hold paradox is necessary to uncover the deeper reality that resolves the paradox.
Yeah.
So our society is not comfortable with paradox. It's not comfortable with contradiction. We want to have certainty. We want to say, here's who's right and here's who's wrong. Here's what's true and here's what's false. So typically, if we get contradictory or paradoxical information, like data points that don't fit the story, we just banish them. They're banished collectively to the realm of pseudoscience or new age airy-fairy nonsense or whatever. And even on a personal level, like I've done this, like I've had experiences. I'm like, wow, I do not understand what happened. What can I make of that? I'm just not going to think about it. Because if I really think about it and take it in, that changes everything. Changes my entire life and who I think I am and how I'm going to live in the world. So let's just push that one away. So I think that the willingness to entertain paradox, by entertain, I do mean like a guest, to really bring it in and allow it to be at home here. That is a profound path of self-development, especially in these times.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that, because that was going to be almost where I was trying to punchline the conversation today into, which is here we are already. So one of the things that was present for me as I was reading this is I was fascinated to hear your take on the conspiracy myth, fundamentally because I've been down the conspiracy rabbit hole, and I'm aware, even as I'm sharing that, the language that I'm using is quite loaded, calling it the conspiracy rabbit hole. But it started with, who presses play on the money to be injected into society, to all the way to certain political leaders, male or female, and does Hollywood, do people it just started becoming rambunctious.
I know this. I'm familiar with those.
Yeah.
It's like the whole universe. They're a whole reality.
Yeah, right. And then you start picking them apart, and one led to the other, led to the other, led to the other, led to the other, led to the other. And I started getting into this sea of things where I was just like, and I could feel just how it was really entertaining for my mind. Like, it was so nice to just have things to pin, right? And we can talk about that in just a moment. But what came up for me was, it was a full 6 to 12 months that I was legitimately, like, I felt my identity as one of like a conspiracy theorist, but more just everything that was presented that was mainstream was like, nah, there's something underneath that story that is more present. Now, we can talk about where that comes from, but fundamentally, I had to go through a process of realization, and this was huge for me. So I'm just going to take a moment to share, which was, the story's not serving me. The story's really not serving me. I was like getting sucked into this myth after myth after myth after myth, and it's like what you kind of allude to in the essay is, we have this relationship with myth and reality, and it's like, okay, well, I'm consciously, some part of me, like control is a conversation we can have as well, but some part of me is present to my life, and I get to choose to some degree, the reality, the myth that I want to sort of show up with. And that became huge for me, because it was like, perhaps the myth is true. Perhaps, it just is coincidence or whatever, right? In there, I literally had to bring it back to, for me, the saving grace was finding my center. And my center for me was like legitimately accessed by, okay, let's come back home. What is my relationship with my earth, my water, my fire, and my food. It was literally just earth, fire, wind, and water. Like, am I drinking good water? Yes. Am I getting sun? Yes. Am I eating good, nourishing food? Yes. And it was legitimately like, I know how bare bones and simple that feels. And it's almost like, why? But that's how deep these stories and narratives get in. And it's like, whoa, 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 that's not really serving me. But like, what is serving me? Okay, my relationship with the basic principles. I'm well hydrated. I'm looked after. There's no actual like separation or like, not like trying to have this conversation around, okay, like my money, where is it coming from? And then how is that really serving me? But I've got good food, okay. And that's making sure that I am robust. I am looking after myself. And so bringing it back to like bare principles. And that was fundamental in just coming back to a center to then be able to hold the paradoxical views that you're referring to, in my experience.
Yes. It is quite very much like an addiction to dive down those conspiratorial rabbit holes. And I find when I go there, when I dabble in it a little too much, like I'm always looking for the next piece of confirmation, and the next hit of, I knew it. I knew that these evil people are in charge. Here's another outrage, like another level of the indignity. Then it inspires this righteous indignation and plays into maybe a part of myself that is comfortable with being like a persecuted, misunderstood loner, or part of a small group. Interestingly enough, like the cornerstone of most of the conspiracy theories is some kind of an Illuminati,
yeah,
that is in control of the world. Well, by participating in this theorizing, you yourself become part of an Illuminati.
Yeah, totally. You're giving your power to them. Yes.
Well, like it's like you're the ones now. We are the ones who understand the real workings of the world. So there's a kind of an elitism that is this dark mirror to the elitism that we are reading into events. So one thing that complicates this all, okay, so like as you were saying, ultimately to get out of, okay, I want to say two things at once. You're speaking to, I'm eating good food, I'm drinking good water, I'm here, I feel okay. Like this is, you're accessing other sources of information. That kind of information comes through the body. It doesn't come through the internet. And to maintain our sanity when there is so much misinformation and disinformation and spin and hype and narrative warfare and like all that kind of stuff. And who knows, I mean, it's only going to get worse. Deep fake videos, like how are you going to know that anything is real?
Yeah.
That if you're going to base your understanding of the world only on that, you're going to be lost. So we need to anchor into other sources of information. And those are not dependent on what somebody is telling you on the internet. It is, it requires opening up other capacities that are, I mean, indigenous people are much more familiar with these capacities and because their cultures practice them and cultivate them. But all of us have these other capacities in latent form. And it starts with simply paying attention to the things that maybe we haven't been paying attention to, the things that the dominant mythology says are not important. I mean, the dominant mythology says that what's important is the mind and the things that we can learn through the mind. And that's what's rewarded. Things, the manipulation of symbols, basically. That's what our society is built on. And there's nothing wrong with the manipulation of symbols. All societies, or most, had what we would call magic. Magic is a superstitious belief that by manipulating symbols, you change reality. Well, that's obviously true. Dollar signs are symbols. You manipulate symbols in a bank account and you do change reality. It's true. So you know, we're no more or less magical than any other society. But there are many other ways that are getting cut off from us with COVID lockdowns, where we're left only with this. You know, and here I am, everything, well, supposedly everything that you're communicating to me has been converted into data and sent across satellites and, through my computer to me. But even in this situation, if I shift my attention, I can tune into other sources of information that ride the carrier wave of the data, but are not in the data. It's almost like the Zoom link that we have is a key that opens a line of transmission. Like we can connect. That's a little hard because if I look at you, then I'm not looking at my camera, and so I'm actually making eye contact. But even with that impediment, I've got to actually find a way to put my camera like on my screen or something. But even with that,
right where my eyes are, Charles, like like two cameras,
close
please.
enough.
One here. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. Like there's
totally,
even in this situation, we can communicate soul to soul, and this is the kind of capacity that is important to cultivate right now, because otherwise there's no way out of the maze. You're never going to know what's true. The more you investigate any conspiracy theory, the more true it becomes. Not only will you selectively take in the data that fits the theory, but in some mysterious way, you will encounter. It's almost as if the world bends itself into conformity with the theory, so that it seems more and more objectively true. Like you get these synchronistic confirmations. I was once knew a woman who was really deep into 9/11 truth, and this is one of these border regions. Like the thing is, like as you were saying, you just go deeper and deeper and deeper in, and pretty soon, like you're into the world of flat Earth conspiracy and like Luciferian cults, and like there's like no clear dividing line where something plausible ends and fantastical begins. And a lot of like, even this is something I'm cautious about right now, is to disparage somebody as being just a blatant conspiracy theorist in order to bolster my own credibility. Like, okay, well, at least I don't fall for this. Like it's like, if you're the weird kid at school, you bully the even weirder kid so that you can fit in a little bit and get some cred. So I can denounce somebody as new age or something like that, and therefore establish that I'm not, in that category. Anyway, so I knew this woman who was doing 9/11 truth research, and weird shit started to happen. Like one day she got pulled over by 7 police cars, all the lights flashing and stuff, and they took her into the police station. And she was like, oh my God, I'm getting taken to the gulag, et cetera. And then they just let her go, and like one time she received like this big packet of documents in the mail, all in Russian. And like, she had no idea where they were from or why. Like stuff like that happened that is very useful material to construct a theory in which you're like important. And there are these powers, who've taken notice of me and are coordinating against me. But it could also be that there was some, administrative error and they took her in and they were embarrassed about it. So then like you investigate, okay, did that actually happen? Suppose you want to say, okay, is this lady crazy or not? Did it actually happen? You never can pin it down. You look in the police log and it's not there. Well, that proves it's a conspiracy, doesn't it? Because they wouldn't put it there if there was actually, like, you can never pin it down.
The fodder feeds the fire. Yeah.
Right. So this is the maze that I'm talking about, and the exit to the maze is not available. The way out of the matrix is not available in the matrix. In fact, Morpheus says this in the Matrix, basically. He said to Neo in their first interview, he said, he's like, the movie starts with, what is the Matrix? He's trying to figure out what the Matrix is, but all of his inquiries are still in the Matrix. Cannot find the boundary of the matrix from the matrix.
Hmm.
However, his attempts to understand the matrix draw the attention of Morpheus, who then can take him out of the matrix. So basically what it's saying is that there is Morpheus. Like, what is your Morpheus? What do you summon through your futile attempts to understand the matrix from within the matrix?
And so for me, that actually looks like a call to spirituality, hence why it was the earth, fire, wind, and water, which was Basic Principles 101. Hey, Charles, I'm going to try and articulate what I'm feeling, and hopefully we can riff on it. So what I'm hearing is I can feel in this conversation that intentionally things are being kept slippery. And I understand that it's for that paradoxical nature, because before we pin ourselves down as to, okay, like with this perspective, it's like hold the paradox for the other, so that you're not actually slipping into a perspective too far and too wide, to be able to honor both perspectives, so that we're not actually honing in on a particular type of thought. If that's what I can call it. It's probably not the best way to articulate that. But the conspiracies tend to be quite robust and serving a narrative and quite well pinned down. Yes, when we're in it, the rabbit hole is quite slippery, but as an entity, the conspiracy theory is quite solid, quite robust, I can take a bite of it and I can keep chewing, and I can keep chewing down the rabbit hole almost. And I do wonder if just simply that convenience is an instrument of that enables the conspiracy theory, because
Yes. So that is a danger, to basically like philosophize everything and to say, well, this is just one reality and here's another reality, so I'm not going to address it on its own terms. And basically it's an excuse not to do anything and to just be aloof from everything. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Just keep it slippery.
So here's what I've come to in thinking about that question, which is that there's always something to do, maybe, or usually something to do, that makes sense regardless of the factual accuracy of the theory. So if we are talking about hidden powers controlling events behind the scenes, what gives them their power? What enables them to have such power? What is the fertile ground in which they operate? What is the psychology that brings people to just go along with it? Why are people so easily fooled? Why do they not think critically? How does it serve people to believe in a lie? And I think that the most potent disposition of modern people is the I think we might have talked about this last time, like the solution template of find an enemy, like the predisposition to see the world in terms of good and evil, to see the world to see the solution in terms of conquering evil. Once you have that, once that's established, then people are very easy to set against each other, to fight each other instead of looking deeper for the cause, which is why any kind of peace work, any work that diffuses judgment, that attempts to create transparency instead of punishment, like that spreads nonviolence, like all of those things that diffuses judgment and tribalization and so forth. All of these things, they're valuable if there is no conspiracy, and they're valuable if there is a conspiracy. So that's what I look for. I look for what makes sense either way, and I look for the hidden agreements underneath a debate between two different sides, or what unifies different realities. So in the case of the conspiracy reality, and we mentioned it before, that in both, there is, both of them see the world in terms of control. Our dominant system is built on control on every level. Science is, it gives birth to technologies of control. And, conspiracy theories hand control over to the Illuminati, but it's still the same conception of the universe, right? And sometimes it is time to take a stand. It's not like I have no opinions about anything. There are, and I could get like really metaphysical, but I'll just say that there are some positions that I will stand by, and some of them are sort of aligned with conventional views, and some of them are not. Like I think that to the extent that, I was going to say, I believe that UFOs are authentic, and that something totally unexplainable by conventional science has been happening for many decades. I don't know that they are of extraterrestrial origin, but I think that they are. But even that, to say that they exist, like this is where it gets slippery for me, is when we let go of the assumption of an objective reality outside of ourselves. What happens? Enter into, does that mean, like, where do we go from there when we let go of that? Not necessarily into beliefs create reality and the external world is merely a projection screen for our inner world. But where I go is that there is some kind of mysterious and intimate connection between the inner and the outer, with the emphasis on mysterious. So what does it mean? So in the worldview of objectivity, it's a Cartesian worldview. It says that if something happened, that means that at point X, comma, Y, comma, Z, at time T, it happened.
Yeah.
In fact, in quantum mechanics, that's nonsense. There is no such thing as an objective event at X, comma, Y, comma, Z at time T, except as relative to an observer. If you don't measure it, then it is in a superposition of having happened and having not happened. So if you amplify that somehow, and if we are going to talk about interstellar space travel, there's going to have to be some violation of relativistic laws for that to happen. Like there has to be some kind of quantum jump or something going on there. And the behavior of spacecraft suggests that is going on, because the UFOs, they can make sharp right angle turns and stuff like that. That would subject any occupants to infinite G forces. Like there's no way that they are moving in reality as we conceive it. Something's going on here. So anyway, this is like, I almost can't answer this question without taking it deeper into the nature of reality.
Sorry, go on, please.
I'll just add the intimate part of it, being that all of these different, and you experience this when you're like, I'm not really sure if I like who I am when I'm inhabiting this conspiracy world. All of these beliefs correspond to a state of being. So I could, go into, like, say, a genuine right-wing conspiracy theory where, Black Lives Matter is the creation of George Soros, et cetera, and like, I can't overthrow that just based on evidence. But who I become within that feels kind of pinched, and ungenerous. It's like, that's not me. So when I do take sides, because I do, like, I'm not, it's like, oh, they're all equal, they're all metaphysically equal.
You're just a neutral blob floating through. Yeah.
It's like I look for who I become, how they co-resonate with myself, and which one invites me into, as you would say, my better self, my next self.
And there is a conscious choice that is available to us to some degree, but we are also impregnated into the myth that we are operating in. And sometimes, it takes some level of suffering to identify that. Sometimes one of the key things that you were referring to is the intimate, and what, I am taking away from what you just shared was one of my deepest things that I consistently sit with is that we're all the universe looking in on ourselves. And by order of refraction and light and looking in on itself, there is less incentive for the Charles to be identical to Amrit, because the curiosity is not then satisfied. We're like, one of us is superfluous to the grand design of it all, right? And so in that, when we're talking about, still having our parts, still having our views, still having our positions, I see where that comes in. It's like, I'm still going to have my opinions. I'm still going to have what I side and align with. But the invitation, as you shared, was, how do I tune into my center and what is actually in service to me, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, brother, from there, I do want to talk about this conversation around separation, because the conspiracies themselves are an amazing agent for separation in themselves, as a first point to start. But then secondly, there's this idea of, if I'm taking on the idea of an overlord, then there's this us, me, and them, as you referred to before. There's a separation there. It's almost like its own pandemic of separation that it opens up.
Yeah. It sure is more convenient, like psychologically, to make the problem something external to yourself. Like it's because if you don't separate out evil and project it onto, some nefarious overlords, then you're left to look at your own complicity, your own participation in evil. And that can be uncomfortable, both because, we don't want to think of ourselves that way, but also because we don't know what to do about it. Like Amrit, are you the kind of person who would willingly subjugate a young woman to 12-hour days in a dangerous sweatshop just so that you could save a little bit of money? Would you do that to a woman?
I'd like to think I wouldn't, but then I also
you wouldn't. But every time you comparison shop, you are participating in a system that has price bidding, and the subcontractors of the suppliers of the clothing manufacturers, they're trying to get the best deal. Even if there's nobody who would actually like to do that, it still happens.
It's not advertised on it's not on the label. Yeah.
No, it still happens. And nobody is maliciously perpetrating it. So you can't solve the problem by weeding out the weeds, the noxious weeds, the taking out the bad people, sending Batman in there to kill the kingpins or whatever, and problem solved, because you're part of that problem. So I think, and again, I'm not saying that a conspiracy theory is just this, but part of what it is the outprojection of one's own complicit participant in systems of evil. But just because it's convenient doesn't mean that it's true. And just because it's comforting and convenient doesn't mean it's not true either. I do think that there is some explanatory power in, here's another truth in the conspiracy myth, which is that what we see in the media, in this circus. I mean, words like circus come very naturally. It's a show. It's a spectacle. It's not what's really going on. There are things happening behind the scenes. And conspiracy theories invite us to look at that. So even if they're not literally true in the total sense of the whole world runs by conspiracy, they're definitely part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the Kennedy assassinations, for example, obvious conspiracies.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hard to imagine. Well, I understand why the public accepted the official explanation, because to reject the official explanation would be to reject so much of what we hold as true. And this is another aspect of the conspiracy myth that carries truth. Like I respect the people who are devoting their lives to elaborating the conspiracy myths.
Mm-hmm.
These are storytellers. These are myth makers. These deserve our respect, not our condemnation
And cringe.
and, yeah, like people like David Icke. Like, I'm not here to beat up on David Icke. He's doing a valuable service, and who knows how much of what he says is true and how much of it is the gathering of data points to fit a theory, intentional and unintentional and synchronistic. Who knows? But he's definitely showing us something. So the to some extent 9/11, but to a much greater extent the Kennedy assassinations are. You don't have to dig that deep to realize that the public fell for what they wanted to believe. And that's another aspect of it. Like, it only works if people want to be deceived. And so if you want to address the fertile ground for a Illuminati to control the world, that's one of the places to look. Like, what part of us wants to be deceived? What part of us is afraid of the truth? What part of us is resistant to our reality falling apart? Because when our reality falls apart, then our identity falls apart. When the world falls apart, who we are in relation to the world falls apart. So people actually welcome the charade presented to them because maybe we're not ready yet to expand into the selves that we become when that shell finally dissolves.
Yeah, and so thank you so much for this. Wow, that was put so eloquently, brother. And so in there, one of the things that comes up for me is this relationship with back to even just the purchasing power question, like, when I'm buying a t-shirt and it's most optimal, or even what you're referring to, the inner world and the outer world and how we're navigating that. This is going to sound like an excuse, so pardon me for the way this sounds, but I'm a human being with limited awareness, right? Or perhaps I've chosen that as my myth. And there is this knowing that we were potentially going to talk about at some point, because there was a flag in there for me. But this, with our, like, how possible is it to make every decision consciously? And this perhaps leans a little bit into some of the stuff we talked about last time with sacred economics. And, like, I make the best decision I can with the bandwidth that I've got to afford the situation. And so in that space, like, it seems like to heal the separation paradigm, it's about bringing awareness. What is the thread that's like at the core of the continuum? But sometimes it's, part of the human condition to not necessarily bring an entire awareness to a situation.
Yeah. Our next stage as a species, and I think for most of us as individuals, is not to finally be free of stories, not to finally be liberated from all belief systems. What we're doing is migrating from a smaller world, a smaller reality, a smaller set of beliefs, and a smaller self into a next set of them, into the next story, into the next drama. But that is what is most uniquely human about human beings on this planet, is that we create stories. And these stories create roles for us to occupy. And when we create common stories, then we enact this drama and can create things thereby that we could not create without stories, without agreements, without, because they create a beginning and an end. They create a destiny. They create a purpose. They allow us to coordinate. Like this is who we are, on this plane, at least in with linear time. A story orders things. It orders our creativity. So this is really, I'm sorry, like super metaphysical, but all I'm saying is that it's not about total liberation for me. It's about what's next. It's about what's like we're straining at the limits of the reality that we created. That was once really liberating.
Mm-hmm.
The scientific reality, the scientific view of reality, was incredibly liberating in 1750, when we were constrained by religious dogmatism and stuff. And now that reality and the state of being associated with it, the rational, enlightened individual, that's becoming pretty confining right now. It's becoming pretty cramped, and we're straining against these bonds, wanting to shed that skin and inhabit a bigger world, and we're getting the invitations into that world all the time. Like we keep experiencing things that are just impossible from within that scientific reality. I'm sure you've experienced things in your life that science would say are impossible, couldn't have happened. Many people have experienced these, not everybody. And if you have not experienced a miracle in your life, that doesn't mean that you are less evolved, because we need people to develop the inner strength and the muscle of faith that doesn't receive much nourishment. So that's another whole topic, but many of us do receive invitations into the larger reality in the form of things that science says are impossible. It could be, a healing experience, or some kind of mystical experience, or a precognitive dream, or, a session with a psychic, and like, oh my God, how could she have possibly known that? Did she have my CIA file? That kind of experience. Many people have had these experiences.
Yeah.
So those are the knockings at the door of larger reality. So and then someday we will molt again and write new stories that allow new kinds of evolution of our species, or even beyond our species.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest lessons I've learned, actually, in this story is that actually what I see is what I idealize as being liberation for me is actually not what I idealize it to be. And actually for me, liberation is entirely woven into service to what's next, and allowing the emergent properties and just being a part of, the inspired evolution that is underway. What is my role in the story, and just, serving that to the best of my ability. And in that, I'm actually free. But looking from the outside in, it's like, but you're stuck, you're serving this thing. It's like, but that is like, I'm playing my role. That is my liberation in the story.
Yeah. And you have, from your introductory yell, it's obvious that your body is communicating a yes to you to play this role right now. And someday maybe it'll feel kind of routine, and you'll feel like you're faking it, and if you really listen to that, then maybe that will be your guide to the next thing. And that, that's the kind of information that your, website statistics cannot give you.
Really? Damn it! Fuck! I spent so much money on them, Charles.
Website statistics say, you're doing a good job. Yeah, you're having an impact and so forth. But like, I get this too. Like my calculating mind says that the bigger my audience, the bigger my reach, the bigger the impact I'll have. But sometimes my body says, no, here's what's important. And it might be something that will be forever invisible to the world. So which one do we trust here?
Mm. Yeah, and the invitation for me to ask this question is then poised, which is, and I almost feel like there is no answer to this, but how much of our story is the collective story, and how much are we writing our own story within that wider narrative? Is there a micro narrative, wider narrative? Like this
Oh
essence of
yeah,
story.
I mean, definitely the broader story uh, influences our personal stories. Um, like if you were born 50 years ago or 70 years ago, then the story of progress would have been much stronger, a much stronger influence on your life than it is today.
Mm.
You would have aspired to be an astronaut or a nuclear engineer, or I mean, those things were exciting then to participate in the onward march of technology. Like that was exhilarating. So that was that helped us write our stories then. And now those influences are much weaker. And so a lot of equally brilliant young people are now going into permaculture, whereas a bright, ambitious young person in 1950, they weren't going to be a farmer.
Yeah, as an astronaut. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's a definite, that. So
yeah. Just off the cuff, like there's also this interesting renaissance for like meditation, inward practices. It's almost like there is some sort of, we've pushed for the outer and then we're pushing for the inner as well. There is this thing that we're undergoing, right?
Yeah.
Or it seems.
Yeah, I mean, meditation is one of the ways that we can access these sources of information and these capacities that are not available through the internet, not available through the mind, not available through our technologies of control, through our systems of symbol and representation. It is, one of the ways that we access different sources of knowledge. So they are, I think that's one reason why meditation is so appealing to many people today. Yeah.
That's it's really timely that you're reflecting on that with me here. Simply because I've recently done a few podcasts on intuition, and actually you mentioned something similar in your essay, which is I interviewed Sonia Choquette. She's a spiritual teacher in the States on intuition, and she interviewed 100 CEOs on what they thought was their like key tool to being like best CEO sort of thing, and then they all unanimously said intuition. And then subsequently, when asked, would you tell your second in charge that intuition is your key tool? 100% said no.
Right, it's supposed to be data and analysis.
Yeah, it's meant to be a control. I'm meant to I need something tangible.
Right.
I don't want to know that the world's running on a hunch. But in that, the key thing that I subsequently have had a couple of other podcasts, and what's been dropping in is even intuition has this potential, but it's also a bit hazy and wispy, and inviting in the conversation around a knowing. Like there is a field of knowing perhaps that is available to us. And I reflect on this from the conversation that you were sharing before in terms of, yes, right now there is the data signal communication between Charles and Amrit, but then there is also the fact that two souls have collided to communicate with one another in this present moment, in this reality of whatever this reality is made of. And here we are having this conversation.
Yeah. I don't think that intuition is, I would say it's more mysterious and less mysterious than people think. People think it's like this totally other faculty that's separate from our other mental faculties, separate from reason, separate from observation, separate from practice, But my understanding of intuition was deepened by reading the anthropologist Wade Davis's work on Polynesian navigators who are able without instruments and there's very, very few left. Maybe it's having a resurgence now, but they almost died out. Like this lineage almost died out of navigators who, without any instruments whatsoever, could find tiny dots of an island over hundreds of miles of open ocean. And you can imagine, like, they're like, okay, change course, one degree to the left, or starboard, or whatever the word is. And someone say, well, how do you know that? It seems like intuition. And they might be able to explain it. They might be able to say, well, it's because the way that they learn, the way that they're trained, they learn to observe the flight patterns of birds and the currents and like the sea life, and the stars, and like so many things, the patterns of the clouds. Like there's so many things that they observe, and they might be able to explain some of those and provide what seems like actually a very rational answer. But that chain of reason, over time and with practice, it gets internalized and combined with other ways of observing and inferring that make it unexplainable. But it's not actually separate from reason. Like the traditional training for these people was to immerse them, like when they were toddlers, to put them into protected coves and stuff so that they could feel currents and waves and understand on a deep body level the ocean. So it's not like they just enter some altered state and an intuition pops into my head. That's like this that conception of intuition is, like, I don't want to discount it, like, but it is a
different
bit
thing
anti-materialist, like, and I think that I like to embrace more of reality in my spirituality, more of materiality, and not coordinate off into a separate realm, a non-material realm. So, and I'm not, professing to be an expert on intuition. But for me, like, sometimes I do this when I hold workshops. We do this activity where we name the gifts of the person standing in front of us, and like I'll demonstrate it first, and I'll get started, and pretty soon, like, the person is in tears because I'm like naming, like, how did you see that? It seems like I have like some mysterious psychic ability, but it's actually like I just see an expression, I make an inference. It's actually, in my experience, quite rational, but it is experienced by somebody as being like that. I'm like some, like I'm psychic or something like that, and then everybody does it. It's not like I have a special ability. Like once I set the field of that ability, then everybody's doing it. So yeah. Well, that's a little bit of what I have to say about intuition.
I think there's a couple of layers of permission in there as well. In just the example that you were sharing is, first, I get that, perhaps we've all been conditioned with the water body, and that sinks into our cellular sort of gut and our body, and it becomes a memory, and it's like, yep, and it all becomes part of our rational reasoning. But I do know, having worked with people, that when that surfaces, there's also a moment where it's like, honor it, or it's like, oh no, that's not, and so there's like this level of permission sometimes that is required to sort of go, okay, I'm going to explore, even though this makes me really vulnerable, it makes me woo-woo, makes me come across as hunchy, but this is what I want to say. And if you're lucky, I feel, or in most of my cases, actually, when I operate on that and I share, like I've been doing this in this podcast already, like there was like already a set idea of where I was going to go. I had no point at time did I think we were going to discuss intuition, but I'm kind of going like, okay, let's, let's just open and let's just see where it goes. And then from there, that intuition like perpetuates, and I learn something that, I didn't even know that I could potentially learn, and that humility is there. But I think there's a couple of points of permission in giving yourself permission to honor the energy of what's emerging from that field of awareness that is inside, rather than just tapping into the collective norm, which is, just play that line. And then the other part is also, disconnecting from other people's narratives and what they're going to think about you for sharing this thing that is just emerging from you.
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to, I'm conscious of the time. So one of the things that really, I loved, I really love the essay. If you guys haven't tuned into it, if you haven't tuned into the fact that I love the essay, probably worth going to check it out. It's a short, succinct, powerful read. And I love the invitation for humility in there, brother. The way you put it was, what unites the pundits of all persuasions is actually their certainty, who is trustworthy. And in the end, it's the person with the humility to recognize when he or she is wrong that kind of guides you into that space. And it's almost like an ode to humility, to be able to navigate life. And it's your relationship with whatever reality you choose or are inhibiting. Did you want to share anything on humility in that space?
The programming that we receive to be right is really strong. We get it in school, and it's kind of associated with being good. You get that A, and it's humiliating to be publicly shown as having been wrong. And with that programming, and it also plays into the good, evil templates, our side is right, their side is wrong. But with that programming, many people, to some extent at least, end up appearing right rather than serving the truth, or rather than serving healing, or rather than serving justice. So either you are right about everything, or you're going to have to someday, if you serve truth, you're going to have to someday humiliatingly acknowledge, at least to yourself, that you were dead wrong about something. And the more of our self-esteem that we get from being right, the harder it is to do that. And then I think about what makes it, like, where does humility come from? Like, what makes it, well, it comes from humiliation. And what conditions allow us to release into humiliation? For me, it's feeling safe, to feel that I am loved even if I'm wrong. Unfortunately, on the internet, we mostly create the opposite condition through the quality of the comments on Facebook and things like that. Like the association of wrong with bad and shameful makes it really hard ever to entertain the possibility that you could be wrong. So I want to ask, are you willing to sacrifice that? If that's what it takes to heal the world, or to solve any problem that tears at your heart, are you willing to let go of having, in the end, being vindicated, and having it be clear that you were right all along, and now they get it, now they're sorry, now they have to humiliatingly admit that they were wrong the whole time? Like, are you willing to let go of that for real? If you are willing to let go of that, then there's a chance that you can actually attain wisdom.
I think the
metaphor. I'm not claiming,
Yeah.
I'm not like, why am I so familiar with this psychological dynamic? It's because it's in me. So I'm not like proclaiming myself as any especially wise person, but through observing my own folly, at least I see a destination to aspire to.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And in there, as soon as you said, I could see myself in class actually back at school, and it was like, who's right, and I've got the right answer. It's like the first hand to go up, and then it's like, yeah, good boy. It's like the good one. But then also in that, it was like this desire to be the first one with your hand up, the first one to be right, and the sense of competition that is also impregnated into that, and then how the capitalistic society is then built on the competition, and it's like, okay, the wider story, and it's like, pulling apart of that thread. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. So if like anyone listening has that tendency in themselves, to like want to be right, and be easy on yourself. Like, you came by it honestly. This is one of the programs that our society inculcates us with, and you notice it happening, and over time it weakens its hold.
Charles, last question today. What does an inspired evolution mean, or what does it look like to you?
Inspired evolution. I guess what inspires evolution in me is to witness people who are more evolved than I am, in some way. I do not believe that there is a single axis of evolution, and some people are more evolved than others, and some people are less conscious and more conscious than others. But there are many, many axes of development that a human being can go through, and probably all of us are really highly developed in some ways, and in kindergarten in other ways. And so when I witness somebody who is at maybe one or two stages of evolution past me in a certain realm, that inspires me. It awakens the part of myself that's ready for that, and shows me that it's possible. Shows me what I'm ready to become. So, and I think, like, I find that if I look really carefully, pretty much everybody I meet can offer that to me. It's like that old Buddhist technique of seeing the world as everybody in the world as a fully realized Buddha except yourself. The whole world is set up for your enlightenment.
I love that. I love that. Oh, brother, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your presence here today. Thank you so much for your essay, guys. The link to the essay is in the show notes. And it, for me, it was a 15-minute read. So if you read faster or slower, it could be 10 to 20. Definitely, I encourage you to check it out. And Charles, thank you so much for being here today, for all the work you've done on yourself to inform this conversation and this conversation here today. And as always, wishing you all the best for the future, brother.
Yeah, thanks. It was a real delight. For real. Yeah, thank you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment. And if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.